LinkedIn presents.
Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila. This is the Forbes Books Podcast, and today we're going to talk about the intersection of sports and business, a topic that has fascinated millions of fans, like me, who want to know more about the money behind their favorite games. One of the pioneers who brought sports and business together to mainstream media is Darren Rovell, who covered various aspects of the economic influence of sports during his time at ESPN and CNBC. He's also amassed over 2 million Twitter followers who check out his insights and analysis on sports business trends. And now, he's an investor and an entrepreneur who recently launched his own product, Kickstand Cocktails, a ready-to-drink beverage, or RTD, that combines vodka and fruit juice with a bit of a kick. We're going to talk about his career journey, his insights into the sports business world, and his tips for aspiring entrepreneurs. Darren, welcome to the podcast.
How we doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Darren, but man, it's amazing to see your career. I mean, we have kind of known each other for quite a while, and It's impressive that you sort of got an MBA from doing your job. You've learned so much about business from covering business. Talk to me about that transition from being sort of in front of the curtain to going behind the curtain to see how the sausage is made.
Yeah, so I didn't want to toil in small markets when I was coming out of college, and I kind of found sports business. And at the time, journalists were moving over to sports business only because they were forced to, because they were on the stadium beat at their local paper, right? So they were a city reporter who were then moved to the sports section because every day people wanted to know what was going on with their stadiums as part of the stadium boom in the late 90s. And I think as I, was at ESPN and CNBC and back to ESPN again, there was just a point where people, if they didn't understand the business of sports, they just couldn't be a good fan. And you know all about radio, Joe. So growing up in New York and WFAN being the first 24-hour sports radio station, people would always call up and sound like total buffoons. And so in the back of my mind, I always thought of the education part of helping people understand base year compensation and trading and all, how things work. And, I think Sports Center and everyone else went along with me whereby when a player then went to a team, then the anchor would then say, and the contract is worth like that. Prior to 1992, 93, that did not exist. People wanted to learn more and more about business. And, so I was doing that. And then it was just interesting because players would be those people who were being educated as well. And they knew my name, and I would interview Kobe Bryant once a year on some sort of business thing or endorsement. And, one time in 2010, he was like, hey, probably on the second half of my career, I want to know more about business. I figure you'd be the guy to introduce me to people and teach me a little bit. And I gave him my cell phone, and off we went. Kobe is, just what an incredible person he was. I can't believe I say was. It's still so hard. And yeah, he wanted to get Harvard business, reviews, case studies, wanted to see what my suggestions were and stuff like that. And it was really Kobe who, said, hey, what should we get into? And in 2016, I said, hey, I think you should invest in a beef jerky. And I had written a book on Gatorade, and I had always been kind of a student of the game. I loved food and beverage. I loved being in the supermarket. My wife would always, say, can we get out of the supermarket? And why do you have to buy every single thing that is new? And then, I guess after a while, being with me for 17 years, she now knows that I should go in an hour before. But I saw the trend of beef jerky, and I went to LA and went to a meeting with Kobe and the people at Crave Jerky and said you should invest in this. And he brought along a financial advisor who said, I don't love it. I don't love the deal. He would have put in $8 million, and they sold 6 months later for almost 300 million, and so he would have made 23 million, which is in 6 months,
Wow.
which is an interesting one because 23 million was what he was making in the NBA that year. And so, he said, all right, the next one I'll blindly put in money. In the meantime, I was like, you know what? I didn't put money into that, and now I'm mad. And it really started Tastemaker Capital, which is a food and beverage, kind of like a mini VC firm where we invest in food and beverage and stuff like that. So I started that and started bringing athletes in, and I'm the idea guy, and my brother wrangles the money, and we have a finance guy as well who we grew up with. It's just the three of us. But in the meantime, I gave Kobe, I said, all right, you're going to blindly put in money wherever I say, which was a lot of pressure. I said, okay, I think you should put money into Body Armor, which in 2014, was a Gatorade competitor. No one had ever blown up Gatorade. Obviously knew a lot about it because of my book. I knew a lot about the guy behind it, Mike Rapoli, who sold vitamin water to Coke for $4 billion. And I said, it might not taste good now, but he just knows how to do it. He knows how to build teams. And, Kobe put in $6 million for 10% and ultimately made about 444 million. That worked out. That's how it kind of turned into, from being a reporter to being reported on.
It's funny, Darren, looking at your career, you've almost had this sort of fortune teller type thing, like where you're able to predict trends. And I want to step back a little bit because in terms of your career transition, because not only were you doing this investment stuff and working with companies and being a bridge for employees, you saw the future in gambling.
Yeah.
And your early reporting at ESPN, you touched upon gambling a bunch,
Yep.
but probably more, you probably would have more if you weren't working for the mothership and the Walt Disney Corporation. Why were you so bullish about gambling when people were still persona non grata, where you wouldn't see, God forbid, an advertisement for a gambling company during a sports event?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who was covering the business, Joe, it was obvious that people were watching games at the end of games for gambling, even though it was illegal. And I always thought it was just really strange and obtuse how all those major sports leagues were kind of like not only denying it, but like when New Jersey, sued to change the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act of '92, which would allow them to legalize gambling and kind of lead to the state by state thing that we have now. That the NFL and Major League Baseball and the NHL, like in the NBA, all opposed it. And I just thought I thought it was insane. And it was so much part of the story. My first gambling story ever was in 2004 with the Chris Duhon story where he hit a three-quarter court shot in the NCAA tournament in the semifinals that swung about $100 million bets.
Wow.
And that was my first for ESPN. But in 1997, when I was at Northwestern, I was the sports editor of the weekly paper, which no one read. Everyone read the daily paper. And my key was to take the two pages I had, where it would be published every Friday, and I turned it into a gambling rag. And I single-handedly brought back the weekly paper, which was to use as extra toilet paper when the toilet paper ran out. So I've always had gambling in the back of my mind. I never really was that much of a gambler, but I loved covering it, and I thought it made so much sense. And I always thought it was absurd. I mean, they had Hank Goldberg toe the line on Sundays, but aside from that, and there was horse racing. But aside from that, ESPN had all these rules with the news desk. Like, if you say anything with gambling or any lines, you have to say it's the Dallas football team, not the Cowboys. And, going through all this stuff. And so then in May 2018, I have about a year left on my ESPN contract, and PASPA gets overturned, and now states can make their own decisions. And I just happen to be in New Jersey, the force behind it, and I start seeing how the daily fantasy companies are quickly pivoting to gambling, and I am seeing the buses being wrapped and the trains being
Mm.
wrapped, and I say to myself, you know what? There are very few times in business where you can basically see the future, but you can literally see it. And Jersey is this way right now, but it's going to sweep the entire country. So in July, I went to ESPN and said, "Listen, I got 10 months left on my contract here. I want to know, are you guys going to go full bore into gambling or not? And if you're not, I'd like to ask out of my contract." And no one asks out of their contract. I mean, basically giving money back. And they said, "We don't anticipate us going full in." And I said, "I'd like to get out." And quickly went to my old editor at ESPN, who had the balls to create a sports gambling kind of like savant data statistics company in the Action Network, and said, "Hey, this seems to be the right destination for me. It's not a tout service. It's based in data. And it makes a lot of sense." And I left 8 months on my contract at ESPN, and in November 2018, with only 4 states had legalized it at that point, I went to the Action Network and got a piece of the company, and a couple years later we sold.
Wow. And it's amazing too, because again, you doing the crystal ball routine, because now you jump to 2022, 23, and ESPN now is struggling. Who knows, Darren, you might have lost your job even if you didn't
True.
walk away because of all the cutbacks that were coming down the pike.
Yeah.
Not that obviously you could see that coming, but you were seeing the future in gambling. And for anyone who's followed you on Twitter knows that you've been writing about this for a while. And that sort of brings me to Twitter, where you've become an influencer and you're quite prolific. I don't know what your wife feels like, but I feel like sometimes, especially in your heyday when you're at ESPN, where you would have like an article like every 15 minutes. I'm like, does this person even sleep? And I know a lot of it was scheduling, and you were doing that a lot of that in advance. But talk to me about your love of Twitter, because I do love Twitter too, and I'm a sort of defender of it, because people say it's like this vile place and it's toxic, and I'm like, Twitter is what you make of it. If you want to follow vile and disgusting things, that's what your Twitter's going to be. But if you're like a sports nerd and you just want to follow what the Mets or Jets are doing, you can get that. If you are a movie nerd and you want to follow like movie critics and filmmakers, you can do that. So talk to me about your love of Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, I have a love of facts. I have a love of, to go back to PLJ days, pop up video, like and MTV. And so, I have 2 million followers because it allows me to provide information, whether it's arguably useless or not. It just allows me to put things out there, and I think people like that. I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter. I love putting things out. I love how it provides me relevance, and I'm kind of, of the mindset that, the worst thing that you could be is in the middle today. Like, if you really desire to be relevant, you want people to love you and hate you with equal passion. And I'm fine with that. It's why people say, oh my God, that's such a Darren Rovell thing to say. Well, I've branded the F out of myself, right? Like, which has also been good, because people will send me stuff saying, "Hey, I think you'd post this." And they've kind of been my mini Darren Rovell's, and sending things, and it made it easier on me, and been kind of my eyes when I can't be everywhere. So yeah, I mean, I would never get off Twitter. I think there is a lot of cesspool part of it, but walking away would never be an option for me.
It's funny too, Darren, and I don't know if it's just because we're kind of ilk mind, like we're both kind of Gen Xers who from Jersey, and we love information and we're sports nerds. But when you Google Darren Rovell, the word polarizing always seems to be popped up. Are you fascinated by that you're polarizing? Because I don't think you try to intentionally ever do anything. But I mean, obviously now you're 10 or 12 years into Twitter with it. But like, are you shocked that you're like, why would people think I'm polarizing? I mean, or do you like, or you've gotten to the point where you're like, celebrities get where you're like immune to that kind of stuff?
No,
like, do you ever wonder?
It's weird because my daughter's now 11, and the first time she Googled me, like the first hit is like a 5,000 word piece on BuzzFeed on why so many people hate Darren Rovell. And it's interesting that someone in my life then, and when they came to me, they said, "Do you want to participate in that story?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, for sure," because I'm fascinated by it. And like, it seems like the hate started from the idea that sports was supposed to be innocent, and I came in and put all the dollar signs in, like I was Ted DiBiase or something like
Right.
that. I was the villain that clouded the liquid. Like it's just, and I think that's where it started, and then I think it just continued where I don't care what people like. It's so weird. My wife says to me, I don't understand. You were a chunky kid. You sucked at sports. And people are like, Darren Rovell must have been thrown in lockers as a kid. And I was like,
Right.
no, actually, was not thrown in lockers. And I was totally immune to everything. Like, I could get picked last in the schoolyard and be like, all right, let's go. Like, there's something with me, and maybe it's my parents' upbringing. I don't know, but I've never been concerned with what anyone thinks about me at any point in my life that I remember.
So you
And
were prepared for Twitter, basically.
yeah,
You've been
yeah,
preparing
yeah.
your whole life
I
for
was
this.
I was born for Twitter. I was born for Twitter. Yeah. I mean, so I say something, someone goes nuts. The only time I'm confused is when like I say something and sometimes it's just like it seems so manufactured. Like the
Mm.
craziest one was probably when Bill Buckner died, and I said it feels so weird as a Mets fan that my greatest moment of sports fandom was in his worst moment. And then I'm trending on Twitter ahead of like Jared from Subway who's going to jail. And it's like, what? Like I don't get like, oh, Darren Bell's such a horrible person. I'm like, what? It's me saying that I feel guilty as a fan. Like, how is that, reprehensible? So
Yeah.
it's definitely weird.
So let's get into another one of your many day jobs, and that's founder and CEO of Kickstand. As you know, the RTD trend exploded a few years ago and seemingly continues to grow. For most folks, they were introduced to it by the Trulies and White Claws of the world. Do you worry about being in RTDs now and seeing like, oh man, are people over this? Because if you walk into a liquor store nowadays, man, you can't even see liquor. It's all RTDs just
No,
all
no,
over the
people
place.
people are not going to be over it. It's going to be the delivery system of a cocktail in a can will only get bigger. I have no doubt about that. But the only reason why I went into it, because you have to be crazy to go into this business right now, is I felt like I had a point of difference. I was having a never had any intention to do this, but I was having a canned cocktail at the wonderful New York City restaurant Beauty in Essex,
Mm.
and it was a jalapeno cucumber cocktail, and I was like, wait a second, spice is taking over the nation. Why can you only have a margarita or a Bloody Mary? Why isn't there any cocktail that has some complexity of spice? A lot of these cocktails are so flat. Your first taste is the same as your last taste, and it doesn't develop with you. And no one says that in a canned cocktail, wow, tastes just like what I could get at a bar. No one. Okay,
Right.
so especially as you mentioned, these seltzers, these malt brews, which are essentially sugar brews, which the only reason why they make them is because for tax reasons. They cost less tax wise. So it's a whole big joke on the American culture. And so I said to myself, I know that it's not a meritocracy. It's not build the best cocktail and you'll win, but I think I'm a good business person and I think I can have a great cocktail, build a good team, and be differentiable enough that I could build this into a couple $100 million business.
And, one of the things that people don't realize when it comes to the spirits and beer and all that whole amalgamation of business vertical is the distribution part of it.
Oh,
That's the sort of the dirty little secret. And I'm sure you are fully aware of it now more than ever before, now that you've got your own company. But talk to me about getting Kickstand on shelves because, as you know, there's a finite amount of shelf space in
right.
these liquor stores. Talk to me about that battle for you.
Well, luckily again these sugar brews going out, truly going from truly malt to truly vodka. I mean, you can't just change it up. There is some brand dilution there. And there is a whole bunch of garbage. And in some cases the big boys are making garbage to be on purpose they're making it, and they know it's garbage, but they're just clogging the shelves so that new upstart brands can't get there. But yeah, distribution's crazy. You have to get with a distributor. You have to sell it to the distributor who is the wholesaler, and the wholesaler has to sell it to the retailer. And that's just how it goes. And then in some cases, you can't be in convenience stores. It depends on the state. In some cases, you can't be in supermarkets. In some cases, the state runs the liquor stores, like in Pennsylvania, where you can only get into 10 state liquor stores every 2 weeks. So in order to get all of Pennsylvania, it takes you a year. So there's all these things that go on. And there's other things like in Ohio, there's a lot of people who run liquor stores who don't drink. So you walk into the liquor store and you say, "Hey, try my product." "I can't. I don't drink." "Okay, who runs the inventory here?" "I do." "Really?" Every day you walk into a store with products that you know nothing about. I'm like, "Okay, so even if I sell this in and you like my brand and you like my black matte packaging, what happens when someone walks in? 'Hey, what does this new canned cocktail taste like?' I don't know." So there's a lot of things, I prefer to be in states right now with supermarkets because if someone walks into a supermarket, they have an open mind, much more of an open mind than walking into a spirit store where they have either their list or they know what they want. And I could win more in supermarkets. So we're really boffo on Ohio and Florida for that reason. Ohio is like ninth in the country in population and third in canned cocktails because you
Wow.
could go into a supermarket and get your turkey and cheese and walk out with 48 cans without going through a liquor store or things like that. So it's been a real great learning experience. We came off the Super Bowl. I really don't allow myself to get caught up in the success, but to see your canned cocktail, which retails at $11.99, $12.99 for four, sell for $15 each at the Super Bowl is quite insane, and I definitely got caught up in that moment.
Cool. And lastly, Darren, this all comes full circle for you because you made a career on reporting on entrepreneurs and now you are one. What's it like? Is it like you expected it to be because you knew how difficult it was for all these companies to succeed, but now that you're in the middle of it trying to scale a company, build it from basically nothing, is it harder, easier? I mean, how do you feel now looking back at your years of reporting and now being part of the business?
It's about what I expected. I mean, I feel like now being 44 and being in the business for 21 years and watching it and kind of going in a slow pace from being an investor to now being a CEO and a founder. I know some of the rules of business. I know where people go wrong. The number one thing people do is they think that product alone will carry the day, which is not true. You could have the greatest product in the world, and as I said before, it is not a straight up meritocracy. You need to also have the greatest people. And assembling the best team and the best people and the people that match your passion and understand and are type A personalities and will get your 3 a.m. emails and at 3:01 it will say red. That's really where you win. But there's a lot of patience. I put a lot of my money in before I took friends' money. I had a physical product. I was in 2 states all on my own because I wanted it to be more than an idea. And I wanted, if I didn't think it was going to work, I wanted to be able to pull the plug and not hurt anyone. At the end of 5 months, I felt great and felt like I was on the path and then took money. And friends' money is harder to take than institutional money, but it's a whole lot sweeter when you succeed.
I love that. And let's wrap this up for some advice for entrepreneurs because you talked about what you saw and why they failed. Why do you think entrepreneurs succeed, and why do you think you have a good feel about Kickstand succeeding? Why do you think those entrepreneurs that are really getting it done, why they're doing it?
I always think about the negative first. So
Yeah,
I think,
that's why I want to bring you home to the positive.
yeah, no, I think why they don't succeed is because they surround themselves with yes people, and they surround themselves with people that won't challenge them. I go to all these trade shows and I see some of these products where I'm like, what the hell? and the founder says, hey, I put my entire 401k into this and my family is behind me and this and that. And it's like, yeah, I wish someone in your family said, like, really? The 900th popcorn? The 600th ranch water? Like, I think you have to have people around you who will challenge you, will say that's not that good of an idea, or it's not going to work out. And people who are willing to change immediately. I'll give you an example. I go into every state that we go into, I go into first, and I do a sampling. And at this sampling, in 3.5 hours, I sold 56 4-packs. 77% of the people who tried it bought it. But I have to understand that I'm like Ron Popeil with this shit. I can sell this easy. And then you have this expectation when you leave the market that, you're going to get a third party sampling and these guys are going to do it. And what are they going to get off you? Well, there's an expectation that they do 25, 30% of you. And then, I heard, hey, we did 3 samplings, 9 hours, and we sold 6 4-packs. And it's like, okay, this doesn't work. These people are just showing up. We can no longer use third-party samplers. We have to have someone on the ground who has incentive to do this. Otherwise, no one really cares. That was probably my quickest learning here, that you have to have an internal team and you can't just have consultants. Because if you do everything third party, there's just no way you can win in this business. So, I think there's a very, very fine line between success and failure. And especially in the canned cocktail space or any crowded space, you have to find people who are brand fans, who are in positions to scream and say, look at this. America's drinking garbage. Shouldn't we care that there's something out there that makes a whole lot of sense that people want? Don't let the bureaucracy and the clutter allow this to fail. And, part of it is for the almighty dollar and for me to be rich as hell. But part of it is also how angered I get at the quality of the other products in the field here.
Well, his name is Darren Rovell. He's the founder and CEO of Kickstand Cocktails. 5 states now, but Darren, I have a feeling next time we connect in the next year or two, it's probably going to be a few more. Looking forward to what happens next. And then, of course, inevitably, who you're going to sell Kickstand to, because I know the way Darren Rovell thinks, he's thinking about who he's going to sell it to. So looking forward to all that, Darren. So thanks for the time. Really appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome, and that'll do it for this episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you dug the show, make sure you take a second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please, don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.